It's time to smash it up in a way that perhaps the trenches at Florida State is not doing right now. He's Ira Schafel, managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Light. Come on in, everybody. Group hug.
Gather around.
Come on in. Gather around. We're all going to do this together. We hope you really enjoyed. I did. I was watching until the last 5 minutes or so. Wake Up Warchant here on Warchant TV with Aslan and Corey breaking it down. This is the Wednesday Smash. Yeah, we changed the color of the day. It's a special edition of the Smash because of the bye week. We were over in Dublin, then a Monday game. We'll be returning to a more regular schedule here in the near future. But we're so glad you've joined us here on the Smash, presented by State Farm agent Russ Forhis. As always, we'll talk about Russ in a little bit. Ira, the question everybody's wondering is, what you sipping on tonight, and is there any of the hard stuff coming?
No, just a little red stripe.
Okay.
I feel like I need to stay away from the hard stuff right now. I don't know if I'm the right frame of mind for that.
Yep.
I think I'm just going to go mellow with a little red stripe, and we'll just kind of take the edge off a little bit.
Thank you to everybody who's coming into the chat right now, seeing you saying, hey, Garrett PCL saying double fisting with content tonight. Giovanni saying, yeah, got to take the wins where you can get and Wake Up Warchant into the Smash. We appreciate everybody coming in. Make sure to hit that thumbs up as you do, because if there's somebody looking for Florida State content right now, masochistic as that might be, they can find us if you hit the thumbs up. So we really appreciate it. Ira, on the postgame show the other night, Gene and I, not a drop. And usually I'll have a sip or two, but Gene will throw down on a postgame show. And he said, nope, it was so bad that we're not touching anything tonight. And I agreed. I think that was the first, what would we call it, like state of Utah quality postgame show in the history of Warchant TV. But I will say to those of you out there, remind me at 7:30 Eastern time, everybody in the chat who's making their way, I am breaking out the Oyster City Hooter Brown. And You might be able to see that there. It's 8.5%. I don't think that thing can focus. This is the strong stuff, but I'm waiting 30 minutes because we don't need to turn this into some sort of slob fest, with all slurring words and so forth. But let's get together and we'll take your questions here in just a moment. Ira, first thing I want to ask you, now that you've had a couple of days, not quite 48 hours to let this all sink in, has it gotten any better for you?
No, not really. And I think the challenge with this, and we talked about some on headlines yesterday, is just you start looking for everything that's possibly gone wrong, and like, why are they doing this? And hey, why are they doing this? And come to think of it, I remember 2 years ago they did this. I didn't really like it, but they were 10-3 at the time. Oh, wait a minute, last year they did this. I didn't like that, and it's just there are so many things that you hyper focus on when things are going poorly, and it stinks. And that because it's, and I think this is the key for Mike Norvell and his staff is they've got to figure out what they can fix in the short term, and not worry about everything that's going wrong, because if they do, I don't even know where they would start. So they've got to figure out a few things that they feel like they can fix in short order that'll help them win football games, the low hanging fruit. And if they can do that, I think that gives them a chance to kind of get back on track. But that game Saturday, there's no area of that team right now where you could say, other than Alex Mastromanno and Ryan Fitzgerald, and I'm going to give the long snapper credit too. I think Mason Arnold, other than that operation, and JP and Carter, the coaches of the special teams, other than that operation, everything else was a disaster. And really, and what's frustrating, I think, is it's even guys that we've seen play really well before. Obviously Josh Farmer played well last year. Patrick Payton played well last year. On offense, Lawrence Tofili, was rock solid last year, and you would have thought he would be one guy you could count on, and now he's not catching passes. The Morlock in practice has been lights out. He can't catch the ball. It's just weird. It definitely feels like it's something where they've just got a crisis of confidence, and it's kind of spreading throughout the team. But that's hard to. I don't know how you point to how that started, and I also don't know exactly how you fix it. But that's the task I think at hand.
Oh, I'm sure he looked long and hard at the situation. Did Mike Norvell between Dublin and Game 2? Obviously he knew something was wrong, and when it gets worse as you try to fix it, that's got to be extremely alarming. Like for the Toafili thing, I felt like he would be featured in the offense, but you can't say anybody's really been featured in the offense at this point. It's been all over the place, and it's been unsuccessful. 21 rushing yards on Monday night. I still can't believe that. there are some numbers that when you think about them, and the more you think about them, the worse it gets. 263 to 21. And Gene had a stat in Dublin as we were doing the post-game show. After the opening drive, Florida State averaged under a yard and a half a carry, or like right on a yard and a half per carry. So you combine that with what we saw on Monday night, essentially Florida State, you could take the sack yardage out of there. They're just not running the ball at all. And that's what Mike Norvell calculated this whole thing was going to be based upon, was the ability to run the ball. And the trenches, look, man, that's me. That's what I was talking about the entirety of the offseason was I don't think there's as much skill. There's more speed. But I really like the fact that Florida State should win more than their fair share of games in the trenches. And that's been glaring. While I think the defensive line, Ira, might have played a little bit better on Monday night, right, but there weren't more, cleanups being made by second-level defenders. I thought for Georgia Tech and Boston College, as veteran as that Yellow Jacket offensive line was, they'd win in the trenches, and they just have gotten creamed. BC didn't do anything fancy, Ira. Georgia Tech might have, but BC did less things than I thought they would do because Castellanos' legs are a weapon. They didn't even use them. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and and one other guy I want to shout out, Kentron Portier played well, certainly in the second half. Those were a couple of big catches and great effort. I mean, who knew you could break tackles? You were allowed to break tackles and go in the end zone. He broke a tackle, eluded a defender, and then got in the end zone. It was awesome. It was a sight to see. But yeah, no, that's the thing. It's defensively, it's funny, man. I was more concerned about the defense in the first game. The second game, because of the plays that were so wide open that Mike Norvell had schemed open that they couldn't hit, the DJ couldn't hit, or receivers dropped the ball, or tight ends dropped the ball, or running backs, that I kind of got a little hyper focused on that after that game. But ultimately, the defense in both games, because as you just said, giving up 250 rushing yards at home is terrible. You look about some of the situations. You got them backed up. Mastromano backs them up inside the 5-yard line. And the first carry, they run up 20-something yards up the middle. Next carry, 15 yards up the middle. I mean, it's like, how is this even happening? And I agree with you. I thought the defensive line, I saw more effort, I felt like, in this game than in the first game. But, there's terrible tackling everywhere you turned. And again, I don't know, because when it's players that you've never seen before, I think we can get into some of the roster decisions and some of that. That's fine. I think that's all fair. And it's easy to be more critical and say, okay, maybe this guy can't play or this guy's not ready. Maybe you need to look at other options. But again, when it is guys that you've seen play before, I've seen Shaheem Brown tackle before. I've seen DJ Lundy tackle before. I've seen some, so that's where it gets frustrating because, that's where you wonder if there's something else beyond just this guy's not good enough. Because some of these guys are guys we've seen play at a high level.
Yeah, agreed. And that's where it gets, you just wonder about the big buzz terms like culture, and that's something that a lot of people are banting about right now. Like what's the disconnect? And I'll take it to an article. It's a feature, Ira, that you put up on warchant.com all the time. And it's a great resource, which is George Henshaw, former college and NFL coach, somebody who knows of which he speaks. And he could speak it on the X's and O's as much as he can, the intangibles of the sport. And to see, for those of you that aren't subscribers to warchant.com, these kinds of features are illuminating, especially in a moment like this. To see some of the language that Coach Henshaw used, specifically after the Boston College game when he speaks on leadership and physicality and tackling and emotion and things like that. I mean, what did it sound like, Ira? Because you're transcribing a conversation here that you're having with Coach Henshaw. He's usually measured. Like, even with the highs, he doesn't get too high, the lows not too low. This is somebody who's been around the game for decades and is saying, yeah, these guys don't have much of anything right now. That's just alarming to me.
Yeah, and like you said, we've been doing this for several years now. I mean, we took a little break. He was actually on the staff as an analyst for a few years, and so we haven't done it every year, but we've been doing it the last couple of years again. And as you said, yeah, I mean, as a coach, he usually sees it from the coach's perspective, and a lot of times he knows that they're dealing with things sometimes that we don't know. Right. But yeah, man, he was pretty fired up about the way they played in a bad way. I thought he was a little bit more measured after the Georgia Tech game. But this game, yeah, I mean, he looks at this team and said one thing I thought he said that was really illuminating, that I think is accurate is he just said, we play slow. He's like, BC looks faster than Florida State does. And there's no way that's true. And I think if you went into the indoor facility with the GPS monitors, I have a feeling Florida State's guys would clock better times than BC's guys. But Florida State's guys are not playing as fast for whatever reason, whether it's not knowing what they're supposed to be doing, whether it's not being confident, whether it's just not being focused, not playing with passion. That's one thing he talked about is, listen, you should see passion from a football team, especially he pointed out in this game, it's your first game at home after playing on the road and losing in your season opener. You've got every reason to want to prove to the world that that's not who you were. And then it looks like you're just kind of going through the motions. And that's something with this team that's weird, man. And I don't know how you fix it. I don't know what buttons Mike Norvell has tried to push. But clearly he's got to find different ones. And then at the same time, anything you do, like there's always, I think as a coaching staff, you're going to push and push and push, but sometimes you have to look at it a different way and figure out why why what you're saying is not getting through. Yeah. And because these guys can play better than they are. I mean, at the end of the day, and that's coaching. At the end of the day, we can blame individual players, but at the end of the day, it's the coaches' jobs, the guys who make millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the best out of these players. And it's not even close. It's not even the ballpark.
No, and Joey's comment here on Facebook, there's no energy or leadership from any player on this team. That's what Coach Henshaw is saying. So, you're aligned. You guys are aligned that, there's a void here. Guys seemingly, it's almost like I already know this from watching basketball for forever and a day. Sometimes with Leonard's offenses, when the defenses were dominant, you'd be like, nobody would want the ball. You could feel like, it's just getting pounded into the court and nobody's moving. Nobody's trying to come get the ball on offense. And it feels like that on both sides of the ball for Florida State, that somebody that like they're all looking around to see who is going to be the dude who's going to step up, take command, make the play and change the game. And they had a couple of pockets here and there on Monday night where you started to see some of that happen. But unfortunately, I think a coaching decision torpedoed a lot of that, which was the fourth down attempt in the third quarter, 4th and 5. I thought the defense was building something. And then the moment that happens, and of course it wasn't incomplete. Of course it had to be returned for a short field, and the defense gives up a score. I feel like maybe slowly but surely, and I know you shouldn't need to have 2+ quarters of this to build confidence against Boston College, but that's where they were. They were getting there, and then it just broke them. The short field and the touchdown. By the time you punt on 4th down the next time, if I'm a defender, I'm saying, "Oh, now you trust me?" I mean, why didn't you trust me last time in that situation?
Yeah, that was a terrible decision. And Mike Norvell admitted it in the post game when Corey asked him about it. He didn't just say. A lot of times, even Coach Norvell is pretty good about taking responsibility when things don't go well. He's very good about it. He's the first to blame himself. A lot of times in 4th down situations, analytics, things like that, he'll say, "Well, could have gone either way," things like that. Even going back to, I think, remember that the 4th down against NC State, 3 or 4 years ago, that everybody hated, including you, I know. Yeah. But this one, he said afterwards, it was a bad decision. But I think this is what happens as a coach when you have a team that's not playing well, is now you start making bad decisions. I think back to the NC State game, was it 2 years ago? The 2 years ago up at NC State, when they threw the ball instead of just either trying to set up a field goal or and because he didn't trust the place kicker at that time. And so once you're worried that your players are not playing well, then you start to kind of make questionable decisions. And that was a bad one. And he knows it. And it made no sense, especially, given the situation with this offense right now. So now if you had Keon Coleman and you just want to throw it up and give him a chance and give it a shot, I guess. But I agree with you. The defense had started playing a little bit better.
Right. And that's, usually Mike is pretty good at reading the room in those situations, about, look, I need to play towards one side of the ball. Hell, I mean, the way they played the Louisville game in the ACC championship, the way they played against Florida, he's leaning
in the Florida game. Yeah.
He knows that that's how I'm going to win this football game. But in that moment, it's just, it's whatever that disconnect is, that's the most alarming.
Let me ask you something.
Sure.
When it comes to the defense, I mean, I think people are looking at it one of two ways, like, trying to figure this out. Like, Adam Fuller obviously was not very popular the first 2 years they were here. But the last 2 years they played really well. They made a lot of improvements those last couple of years. Last year they were really well. They were the strength of the team in the second half of the season. They don't go 13-0 without that defense. But I think some people right now will say, well, that's because you had, a bunch of NFL guys. You had Jared Verse, you had Braden Fisk, Renardo Green and Jarian Jones, and those guys could do things that these guys can't do. Do you think schematically what they're trying to do, and I know you try to look at the game from an X and O's perspective.
Yeah.
Do you think either he's trying to ask these guys to do something they're not capable of, or do you think it's more just about players getting the job done?
So first of all, I think schematically he tried to shake it up a little bit this game. They've run 4-3 in both. That was something we talked about in the post game. There were a couple comments. Why doesn't he run a 4-3? No, they ran 4-3 pretty early against Georgia Tech, and they ran some 4-3 in this game too. I saw more downhill early in this game. They couldn't get off the field is the problem. They get themselves in third and medium or third and short, but they could never make the play to get themselves off the field. But I saw more linebacker blitzes, more secondary blitzes. Like, it seemed like they were trying to force the issue a little bit more. Whereas at Georgia Tech, I think they were just trying to absorb things and then diagnose.
Keep everything in front of them.
And right. Keep everything in front of them and go make a play. Like, I thought there was a bit of a difference there. Here's the thing I'd say is when Tatum Bethune got here, Ira, I thought the first couple of practices I saw him on the field, these were the days I would go to every camp practice that I could. And I thought the communication just got so much better.
Overnight. He was a great communicator overnight, for sure.
And this is before the green dot. The green dot is now the norm, and it's now the future of the NFL style. But they were so poor at being ready at the snap, I thought, in those days when they were going 11 on 11. And in that moment, you're thinking, well, it's a talent deficit issue. It's, they're trying to build to a place, and they need somebody to help set the standard. So when Tatum got here, I thought that changed dramatically. He and Kalen DeLoach knew each other's games inside and out. I mean, they're very good friends. You've done features on the families bonding between the two linebackers' parents, sets of parents bonding. They were outstanding in the way they communicated. So the D-line didn't have to worry about what gap they were in. They were going to get aligned properly. And I thought Akeem Dent was good at that too, communicating from the top down. What I'm worried about is when Tatum Bethune is not a part of this program, it seems like communication is a problem. And we talk about, quarterbacks on the other side. Like, is Jordan Travis masking an issue, or has he masked an issue that's been there all along? Man, on defense, I'm wondering, like, did Tatum Bethune and by extension as well, Kalen DeLoach, did they mask something because they're late again communicating? Cam Riley's played a lot of football. Now, even though he's new to the program, Mike Norvell, the first thing he said about him was he's very smart. He understands the game, high football IQ. DJ Lundy's been here forever, save for a brief stay in Boulder when he took photos and he appeared on their website as a member of their roster. He came back. Yeah. What gives? Because they don't look ready at the snap. And Ira, if you're playing man-to-man and you're turning a running back loose on a simple flare route 4 times in a game, everybody should be able to handle that if you get to Florida State in terms of, you're not asking anybody to do anything crazy there. Cover the running back. So where your question leads is a very dangerous, dark, and scary place, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know, one thing, and one of the things that the players talked about after the game, we talked to Cam Riley and DJ Lundy after the game, and they both talked about how, just the need to trust each other and to play well with each other and play to each other. And I think that's an area where that team really excelled the last couple of years. I think when Jamie Robinson and Jermaine Johnson were running around, it was just, you had a couple of very gifted athletes, hard-nosed, aggressive football players that made a lot of plays, but I don't know if the overall defense was as cohesive, but I agree. The last 2 years, it was much more cohesive, especially last year. And I think that, you do have some young guys. I mean, Blake Nicholson's out there a ton. You would not expect him to be the most vocal guy. But what's weird to me is some of these secondary breakdowns. You talked about, Trayshawn Ward's touchdown. I mean, on one of them, it's a safety in a corner. Yes. And they both go with the inside, and then they both realize it's almost like they both went with the receiver that broke over the middle, and then they both stopped to go back out to the back.
Right.
And that stuff did not happen. And those are two veterans. Those are a junior and a senior who've been on the field together a ton. If those guys are communicating, how would you expect Blake Nicholson and any of these young guys to do it?
Correct. And that's where I think that falls more towards the coordinator side of things. You can look at position coaches and say, like, linebackers have had these issues too. And you can look at position coaches, secondary linebacker if you want. And that's fair too. The one thing I will say is when the team had the flu, and maybe this is why, but maybe not now, some of those mistakes, Ira, were like 2 go for 1, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Happened last year against BC. This is something I put on in the third and long piece last week, which is they're going to have to retake the exam. Boston College didn't care. Thomas Castellanos doesn't care that Florida State had the flu last season. When Bill O'Brien comes to him and says, what worked last year for you guys? Well, how did you go for 400 yards all purpose? He's like, man, the same stuff they just did in Dublin. The stuff that you're grading right, like it's the same thing. So let's hit them in these similar ways. And you've got multiple instances last year against Boston College where a linebacker and a corner, a linebacker and a safety are both taking a receiver. And next thing you know, Castellanos runs right up the middle. It's like these basic communication things. The difference was, and I put a couple of these clips in that article, when Tatum Bethune was out of position, he was going to end somebody on the field.
Right.
He was going to run through somebody.
Yeah, he ran through some blocks, yeah.
We don't see a whole lot of guys running through blocks, Ira. They're accepting them. Yeah. It's like a collect call. Do you accept the charges? And I accept the charges. They're not running through the wall. And that gets back to some of the things that I think that Coach Henshaw is talking about, where, Ira, he got so mad at one point in the Q&A where he's saying, this is like stealing. In the NFL, we look at it like stealing. You're not holding up your end of the bargain. If you're holding out for more money in the NFL and then you don't play well, as professionals, we take that as a sign of you're taking our money. And that's how pissed off he's getting. He's like, there's no leadership. I don't see emotion. They're playing at dope. They should be fired up. They look flat, and they're stealing.
Yeah. He was referencing because, now with the NIL, it's basically in some degree like professional football. And you have some players who are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if they're not going to give great effort, and I think that's what he's frustrated. It's not about like you didn't play well or you didn't make a play. It's if you're not going to give great effort and you're nailing it, man. The thing about football, especially defense, is if you want to look blocked and if you want to be blocked, you can find somebody to block you. D-Rob, when we had him on one time, we were talking about receivers being good blockers on cornerbacks and how Keon Coleman's, Johnny Wilson, they're great blockers. And D-Rob was like, yeah, man, you can be a great blocker if you're a receiver, especially because corners don't want – they're fine being blocked because they don't want to get off that block and deal with a 240-pound running back. So, I think there's some guys that are fine being blocked. And it looks like, well, hey, man, I'm blocked. Well, that's a personal problem. That's what Mickey Andrews used to say. If you're getting held, it's a personal problem. And they just – they have to beat blocks. And the receivers have to beat coverage. It's not like any of these teams are doing anything. These are teams that should not have better talent than you, and they're pretty much playing straight up and beating you. And that's got to change, but that has to be the players. Ultimately, it's coaches because they get paid the big bucks, but it's the players as well.
Well, that's a wrinkle you have to add. They're well compensated. That's the other part of it these days, especially more so than Georgia Tech and Boston College.
Right.
The amount of resources here, top to bottom. You can cry about ACC payouts, and I do my own fair share of that. Don't get me wrong. This is Georgia Tech. This is Boston College. You've got resources head to toe as a head coach, a coordinator, a position coach, and a player here that they don't have. So what's the excuse? There isn't one. You just have to be better. And coverage breakdowns might be annoying. Here's the segue. You know what coverage doesn't break down? The coverage provided by State Farm agent Russ Forrest.
Well done.
He's our guy. He's my guy. I'm a customer of State Farm agent Russ Forrest. I just came on board with his agency last month for a little bit of extra supplemental insurance, but he's got you covered literally throughout the state of Florida, Georgia, Alabama. If you live in the Southeast in any of those states, as far northwest as you might be in Alabama, all the way down to the Keys, he can help you. He's a Nole through and through. He's supported Warchant.com going on 20 years. He's supported the Florida State Athletics Department myriad ways over the last few decades. He puts his money where his heart is, and that's with Florida State. That's with Warchant. Ira, this is a great guy who has been patiently waiting for the Smash's return. I don't think he was waiting for 0-2, but here we sit. He'll have you covered either way.
Yeah, and I've gotten a few texts from Russ this week, and Russ is pretty fired up about the start of the season. Yeah. So hopefully the Noles will turn it around for him as well. And you guys can, again, insurance coverage, you can never have enough. It's one of those things that you never realize how badly you need or how much you need until it's too late. And Russ will do a great job. His staff is awesome. And please tell him that you saw about them on the Smash and on Warchant because they like to hear it. They like to help Noles, and we like to help them. So reach out if you get a chance.
It's almost time. 5-minute warning for the Oyster City. It's sitting right here. I'm going to very much enjoy it. The Hooter Brown. Ira's having some red stripe. last thing about Russ, I usually read off the Jacksonville Beach phone number. Here's the Orange Park number for those of you listening right now. 904-276-9535, 904-276-9535. And if you're on the pod right now, Russ Vorhis is spelled Russvorhis, and you can type that name in, add a .com to the end, and you will find all the information you need from Russ. We're going to take some of your questions and hash out some more for this group hug that is the Wednesday Smash after a brief one more message from our friend, Russ Vorhis.
Contact Russ Vorhis for an auto quote today.
Got a few contributions here into the show here on the Wednesday Smash. Eddie is the first one that we will bring to the table. Sirs, he says, a bit behind after potential duties. Parental duties. Potential. No, there isn't. Look, man, you got to do what you do. There is no potential. Parental duties. Would love to do free ad reads as a wannabe voice talent, hoping to live up to 5-star Chaffel. Eddie reached out to Wake Up in the previous program as well. He wants it. He's hungry for it. He wants to be a voiceover. Eddie, I know Aslan told you to give him an email. Send me an email as well. It's my first name at warchant.com. Send me an email and we'll talk to you. But
thanks, Eddie.
The contribution. Dave in Bardstown also contributing to the previous program. Thanks for coming back. Double duty here. Who was the quarterback guru that used to run up at guys with brooms? We just need that guy on staff. That would be George Whitfield.
Jameis's guy, yeah. That was the all-time awesome pro day where Jameis had his, the quarterbacks at pro day get to organize however they want to do it. Basically, it's up to them. All the other drills, like the 40, the shuttle drills, the cones, all that stuff, the NFL scouts organize that. But when the quarterbacks want to do that, especially when you're Heisman Trophy winner, they kind of get to run their own little workout. And he had his guy, they had garbage cans. They had brooms. They were throwing balls at him. I was waiting for dogs to be unleashed. It was a wild workout. And Jameis aced it all and was number one pick.
That guy had the whole world hoodwinked though, because he was on College Game Day for a routine.
Oh yeah,
they even did. I think not Rinaldi, but maybe it was Gene Wojciechowski. Somebody did a long form piece on George Whitfield too. Do you think he paid for that, Ira? Like, do you think he might have paid for that? Because, my God, the PR that man got for a 2 or 3 year window, that was more than 15 minutes of fame.
It was awesome, yeah. There's plenty of unfortunately, I'm a recovering game day watcher. I haven't watched it since the snub. I don't know if I'll ever watch it again. But I did used to watch it religiously. And, that was one of the more bizarre. I think it might have been even more than – it was at least one season. It might have been 2 seasons. But it was ridiculous.
So they had it on at the tailgate venue that we were broadcasting from in Dublin. Like, it was on silent, but you could see it on the side. And all I saw was that all the way on the right-hand side of the desk was a very uncomfortable-looking former quarterback at Ohio State. I think the atmosphere was tense. Yeah. And glad obviously nothing happened there. But, it didn't look like a pleasant. That's the last time I've seen game day, and I probably won't be looking at it again unless I'm at some sort of pregame venue. Jordan asks, what do you think is wrong with the defense? Okay, that is a broad question. All of the above. But, Ira, it sounds like we agree on this because we really haven't talked too much about the game since it happened, just you and I. We both feel like the D-line played a little bit better, but they weren't made to look better because nobody came up and made a play behind them. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and just some critical breakdowns, where, again, some pass coverage breakdowns, linebacker or defensive ends losing contain again, little things. And what's funny is when you talk about the effort and why Coach Henshaw was so mad, what play stood out in that game, really, really stood out, and it shouldn't have at all, but was Cam Riley running Castellanos out of bounds on that third down.
Yeah.
Because Cam Riley, it looked like he was running full speed.
Right.
And it stood out because it doesn't seem like that's happening. I would love to have the GPS data comparing what guys, their speeds in practice and in workouts versus their speeds in games. Because it just looks like those guys are not running as fast. And again, I'm not saying that they're, afraid to make a play or afraid to make a mistake, or I don't know what it is, but they just are not playing as fast as they really are. And that was a play where he did, and sure enough, he knocked the guy out of bounds.
I feel like that was going towards BC sideline.
It was.
Yeah. You're so right. And the fact that I can remember that is to your point. Like,
remember the play where the linebacker was running full speed to the sideline?
Right. And that's Boston College looked faster. Georgia Tech looked faster. They're quicker to punch on both sides of the ball, and that's just wild. What do you make? I'll flip it to the other side real quick because the defense is easy to pick on, and it's not like they shouldn't be. When there are breakdowns 4 times of the same concept where you've got Trayshawn Ward and running backs just wide the hell open, I get that. On offense, if you were to pie chart, let's assign some blame and let's take the coaches out of it for a minute. There's a lot being thrown at DJ. I'm here for the discussion, Ira, about blaming the quarterback, but this offense was supposed to be built around the run, and he was supposed to be a manager / elevator type when you needed him to be, not the guy that you lean on for 21 passes in the first half and 40 some odd passes. You were citing this in the Warchant rap, but how do you assign the blame / what needs to get fixed on offense?
Yeah, man, I would say at the root of it, it's not being able to run the football. In that Mike Norvell, what happened at Georgia Tech, I think left Mike Norvell, speechless, lost a little bit. I think he was stunned that when they did try to run, even into numbers that they couldn't run. And I think that caused him to go to this game thinking, okay, we've got to throw it to open that up. And early on, there were plays to be made, and either, Toafili drops a ball, or, as the game goes on, you've got tight ends dropping passes. I think the total was like 6 or 7. I think Gene said Pro Football Focus had drop passes. Well, man, for a quarterback that's struggling, you can't have that. But then what then compounded it was when they did get into the red zone, and I think Norvell knew he had some plays he had scouted them, knew they would work, and ran them, and they worked. And then you didn't hit them. And so now you've had 6 plays and 2 red zone trips, and you don't run the ball at all. Yeah. But it's hard to be too mad at the play caller because you had, you got what you wanted. You had receivers and tight ends coming open. So it's just it's every, it feels like to me, man, when you're like if you're playing cards, if you're playing poker, you're sitting at a poker table or a blackjack table, and you're like, you're running cold, and you just think, man, I've got to force the issue. Maybe I'll bluff this time, or maybe I'll hit on, a higher number than I normally want to hit on, just because I feel like I've got to make something happen, and nothing works. And it feels like that to me. It feels like Mike Norvell is trying to play whack-a-mole, and nothing is working, and it's just kind of spinning. So he's not helping. I think the skill players are not helping DJ. When DJ's had layups to hit, he hasn't hit them. It's just kind of spun out of control. Hopefully this bye week gives them a chance to kind of figure things out. I still think I'm still more concerned about the defense than I am the offense, honestly. But because I feel like the offense will come around, but right now I think the whole team just lacks confidence.
They definitely do. Yet on the defensive side, where the answer is going to come from some of the second level defenders that are being put in tough spots. Like where is that going to get better? I agree with you. I think offensively you might be able to provide some answers sooner there. It's difficult to me because, again, here's the fog of camp. I think I used that term last year, the fog of fall camp, when it looked like Florida State was going to be very good at run blocking and poor at pass protection. And then they get out and they play other teams, and it's the opposite. They can pass pro and not run. Like, the fog of camp to me is, again, about that. The offensive line was said to be the best. Mike Norvell told Phil Steele, he told Greg McElroy, this offensive line is the best that he's had at Florida State. And then from last year's performances from Farmer and Peyton, and then NFL scout presence, that the defensive line is sought after by the NFL. Pete Thamel had a report about that too.
And when you look at the other guys physically, Marvin Jones, Darrell Jackson, you're not going to find 2 better looking defensive linemen, a tackle and an end, in anywhere in college football. So you add all that together, you get to your point.
And in the spring game, Norvell told the TV crew that nobody's had a more meteoric rise as a defensive end / edge rusher at Florida State in his first semester than Marvin Jones. And you're like, wow, because, even Keir Thomas was awesome. Like, I'm not even going to talk about the 2 guys that went in the first round. Like, Keir Thomas what a hell of a pickup that was. So you're telling me this guy's on a pace that is more explosive and exponential than these other 2, headliners who went first round, and then Keir Thomas, who was an awesome defensive end. So you put all of that information together, you see these guys battle every day, and it was physical in camp. And you're thinking, well, good Lord, we're going to be in pretty good shape here. And then the offensive line shows up and plays like it does the first couple of games. And it's just.
Well, this dawned on me the other day. You know what you never see in practice? You know what I don't think they ever practice against. If they do, maybe they do it on Thursday or Friday. But I don't know that they can good on good, but stacking the box. That's not what Florida State's defense plays. They're not clearly not trying to take away the run. They're playing too high most of the time. And then even if you do it with the scout team, you're not getting the same look as you would in a game. So that I think that's something that, when we're evaluating them again, Georgia Tech, after that first drive, towards the end of that first drive, and then from then on, man, they were bringing safeties hard, linebackers hard.
Yeah. Yep.
And Boston College did some of both. And I know you're going to do a piece about the running game coming up on the site, but that to me is, I feel like they haven't figured out a way to solve that. And I don't know, part of that could be on DJ and not reading it quick enough and figuring out where to get the ball, because it's just been a disaster.
Well, the one play, that first and goal play where there's a screen to the left, I don't know why I didn't pull the trigger. There was a defender maybe going to be able to get a hand on the ball, but it wasn't going the wrong way. Like in a situation like that, the quarterback can help out. Then there are other moments where they're running into a neutral front. They don't, and like you're talking about against Tech, where there aren't numbers in the box, and it's still a gain of 2. And then you're switching out running backs left and right. Like, well, maybe this guy could do it. Maybe that guy can do it. It's just, it's tough to sort through. And this all stemmed with a question about how much blame do you assign DJ? Like, look, man, as Corey put it, you can't chip the bricks when Darion Williamson's wide open in the back of the end zone and the throw goes all the way to the bricks. Like that's an awful look. But on the other hand, this offense was not supposed to be designed around and dependent upon DJ. So I do believe in all instances the quarterback will get more blame and more praise than they should. And I think that's also fair here. All that said, the moment that I think everybody wants to know about is when they run out of the tunnel on Saturday against Memphis and they're going through warmups and it's first team on the field. Who's the quarterback? Is it going to be Brock? Is it going to be DJ? Is it too much too soon, Ira, in your mind? I mean, again, we'll get to see practice tomorrow. Mike Norvell will go on the record again tomorrow for the first time since the game. But he didn't say no to the idea of looking at a quarterback change in the postgame. And I thought that was very telling. He's asked the question in a pretty direct manner. He didn't address it one way or the other. A lot of times when a coach is asked about a quarterback change, they will be definitive in their immediate response and say, absolutely not. So-and-so is my quarterback. Or in this case, DJ's our quarterback. Don't even ask me that question. Let's talk about the line. Let's talk about the running game. Mike chose not to do that on Monday night. What do you make of it? What do you think might come?
Yeah, and somebody just asked in the chat, does DJ look clearly better than Brock at practice? I think he has, for the most part. It hasn't been like night and day. It hasn't been like, like last year, the drop-off from Jordan Travis to even Tate. And Tate had some good days of practice, and we would write about him at the time, but there was a drop-off from Jordan to everybody else.
Yeah.
There's not a huge drop-off from DJ to Brock. But there is a drop-off. I think DJ's been better overall. He's had a little bit more consistency than Brock has. I think, to me, I would like to see, and I would have liked to have seen it in this past game, especially in the second half. I would like to, and I think you could pitch it to DJ and the reason I think it's important to pitch it to DJ in a certain way is because there's a chance Brock does not play well at all.
Right.
There's a chance, there's a world where Brock plays worse than DJ. So I don't feel like you want to go and just make this hard and fast change. DJ, you're now sitting the bench when it's a guy that I think you may already have confidence issues with. So to me, I would approach it as we're going to work in some packages for Brock. And Brock's going to get a few series. We need to see what he can do for the team because the team needs a spark. Yeah. And I think that's the way you kind of present it. And again, it's not that you have to get DJ's approval, but I do think you have to manage emotions when guys need their emotions managed. And I don't think it would be productive to DJ to just make a change. So that's what I would do. I would try to give Brock a couple of series and kind of present it as a package, maybe where he can do some rollouts. He does have some athleticism about him. He likes to run. He likes physicality. And then see if that gives the team a spark. And if it does, man, now your job as a head coach is to ride the hot hand. And so it's an easier decision to make. So that's what I would do. But, I think he's got to be considering all of it. what I would encourage people to understand is we haven't seen anything in practice to make you think, okay, Brock is going to come in and blow the doors off.
Right.
I have not anyway.
No.
And Luke is very, very young, and I think it might hurt him to go out there and, struggle on that stage. So it's a tough situation.
There's some humanity in there for Brock too that I'll mention in a second. But Dave, again, thank you for the contribution. Corey keeps mentioning, since we're talking about Brock, Glenn, the running threat that Brock would bring. What about the moxie? That might be just as impactful. Did you see the swag he brought with his touchdown dance versus Northern Alabama? Yeah,
that's in him, man. There's no doubt. It is,
yes.
And that's the thing that you can't point to, you can't quantify, and I think is something that is a reality is if the quarterback isn't playing with confidence for whatever reason, then it's hard for other guys to play with confidence. And so you'd like to believe that, that every running back and receiver and tight end is going to make every catch. But if they feel like there's a trepidation on the quarterback's part, that has to be the leader. So for whatever reason, DJ's not projecting that. I'm not saying it's all his fault. It would be great if those guys would step up, but they haven't. And so sometimes it's nice to get a spark. But, man, there is no guarantee at all that if Brock goes out there that things are going to go well. But things aren't going well right now either. So
correct. And you can't keep doing this, especially when you have to assess what you have for the future. I don't want to retcon a real quick deviation off the point here. But I don't want to retcon the portal just because it's going bad right now. Like the value of the portal, like I'm seeing a lot of that right now. Well, you're going to get bid. It was inevitable with the portal. Maybe to a degree, because you need your high school. Like there's no doubt. I'm not saying that high school recruiting shouldn't improve. Of course it should. It's gotten steadily better. But at Florida State, if you're having this much success, you should be parlaying yourself into a really nice class. And Florida State this year, Ira, I think right now is number 3 or number 4 in the country in average recruit rating. Right. In the on-3 industry. So they're trending in the right direction, but you've had some high-profile misses, and you haven't finished in the top 10 yet in the industry rankings. So high school recruiting does need to be better. But I don't want to retcon this thing with the portal because you have players in most circumstances who have more experience at the collegiate level, who have developed physically. You get a better sense of what kind of player you're bringing in, and they've been largely, Ira, very good at vetting the personality types over the years that have come in through the portal. It's almost like they're more strict with the personality types of a portal player than they are a high school player. So the thing to me is a lot of these portal guys in the past came in and kind of led right away. Like they jumped right in and they added to the leadership, but there was already a core. There was already a core there. And it just seems like they're without whatever that core or spark is. The easiest place to look, though, is quarterback. And my only question about Brock's performance in camp, which when I saw it was uneven, like his best stuff would match up with DJ's, but it was uneven. I wonder how much of it is the human element. DJ's not coming in here for a competition. You're going to be the backup. I don't know, Ira. I think there might be a human element there where, well, it looked like I was on the precipice of getting a real shot, but then this guy comes in and I'm going to have to sit another year. I'm not saying that is a negative on Brock Glenn. I'm saying it's a human thing where he's going to have to wait. Maybe now that ratchets his game up to another level because opportunity is knocking after another.
Well, it's funny you say that. So, I may have shared this at the time, but I can't remember. But and I can't remember if you were at that practice or not. But when Jordan got hurt and Tate became the number 1 ostensibly, and Brock was going to be the number 2, that week at practice, Brock looked like a puppy that was trying to get out of the door. Like he was just like, let me at him. I mean, he just was so, you could tell he saw this as his window. Like I knew I was never going to play with Jordan Travis here, but I might play now. And you could tell he wanted it. And you probably don't see that as much, this year. You haven't seen it so much. So yeah, I think there's a very possibility that that's true. And maybe we will see over this next week of practices where he'll feel like, okay, maybe the door is open and, you'll see him raise his level of play. The other thing I would say real quick, there was a comment in the chat. It was a while ago. Somebody said, well, it's hard to have confidence if your line isn't blocking great and your guys aren't catching the ball. And that's 100% true. But that's kind of part of the job of being quarterback is you have to raise everybody else. Like the best quarterbacks make everybody else better. And a lot of times that's because you exude a confidence. When you think of the great quarterbacks you've seen, they've got that about them. Even when things aren't going well, guys know that they're going to lead them. And so, that, and again, that just DJ's had a tough college career, man. Like, there's no two ways about it. I thought he was dealt a raw deal at Clemson. He had his 1 year at Oregon State. Now he gets his big second chance, and it's not going well. So I feel bad for him, but it's, that's part of the gig at quarterback.
And you're 0-2. So, I mean, look, we're out of options here. And if it was 0-2 and there was one out of conference game, I don't think this is even a question, because you'd be 0-1 in the ACC. You've got a bye week. You've got a chance to run it down. But you're 0-2 in conference, and you lost to Georgia Tech and Boston College. It's a bit of a different discussion now about how soon do I make choices to vet what you have in the roster from that next wave of kids, the younger wave of kids.
And what kind of stinks is, and again, this is not to make excuses, man. Florida State should be better than Georgia Tech and Boston College. But this was like the worst possible start to the season. Like, I really feel like if Florida State could have started with a Charleston Southern, something like that, with all these new pieces, it would have been good for them. But then it's compounded by the fact that you've Georgia Tech and you got Brent Key and Bill O'Brien. Brent Key, I believe, played for Bill O'Brien. They've both coached at Alabama. It's a tight circle. And you just wonder, like, how many conversations they had over the summer kind of about how they're going to play Florida State and the resources that they have. Nick Saban was the coach at Alabama that coached 5 of these guys that they brought in. So he knows them as well as anybody. I feel like in some way Florida State may have kind of got hit blindsided a little bit by a really tough hand to start the season. But you got to get through that. And the problem is, what does that do to you? How does that affect these guys? Because, yeah, man, there's guys that have played a lot of football on this team that are not playing as well as they played in the past. And so it's going to be hard to get out of that. It's a tailspin, man, when a whole team is struggling. And it's going to take – I think this is Mike Norvell's – this will be – I don't know everything Mike Norvell dealt with at Memphis, but I got to believe that this window of time is going to be the toughest he's ever dealt with.
I think so. I think it's harder than 0-4 because you have expectations, players, salary, like all that stuff, and you're going to hear it. People had greater patience, even with Jacksonville State. People had a greater level of patience, I think, after that week, as mad as we were, than they do right now. Because it's what the hell, man. You just climb this mountain. You're falling all the way down to the base again, like overnight. And
then you're seeing the mistakes that that were commented earlier. Now You've got a team now that's making the dumb personal fouls. You're to the team now you can't line up right. It's getting false start calls. I mean, this is, the fans can take a lot of things, man. Like, you can take a lot of poor play, but when you can't line up right, or you get called for stupid penalties after the play, one thing Henshaw mentioned is, bad teams make penalties before and after the play. Good teams can make penalties during the play. Holding, pass interference, things like that. When you can't line up right, or you jump off sides, or you're hitting after the whistle and getting called for personal fouls, that's bad football, and that's what this team has been. So it's new problems are creeping up.
Well, it's like I'll use a golf analogy. When a guy wins a couple big tournaments that aren't majors, right, but they never wins the major, he's the guy who can't win the major.
Right.
Then he wins the major, and you're like, well, he's done all these other things, and they become feathers in your cap. Like, suddenly, when they were points of criticism, now they're feathers in your cap. Like, what I can do is the opposite here. Is if the offense looks like this, and last year's offense didn't really get the most out of what we thought the players were going to produce. There were some health issues. Don't get me wrong. I understand that, and I fully acknowledge that. But you look at a game like Clemson last year, where Jordan goes off in the second quarter and you make a couple of plays against a really good defense. But that was a slog. That was not what you expected to see. There were a couple other games like that last year, too, where you're saying, what in the world with this offense? Especially on first and second down, not being able to run the ball consistently. You're starting to pair the failures of this year with the disappointments and the inconsistencies of last year. And if you're Mike, you need all that chatter to go away. And the quickest way you can do that, I don't know. But that's why he's paid over $10 million now to sort through these issues over the next week. The one thing I will say, Ira, is the portal will be necessary again. But what you've got to do, I think, is you've got to see and open – this is where the youth movement, I believe, is almost necessary for the next 10 games. You've got to know what you have in these younger kids, because you can't simply go into the portal and bring players over them without giving them exposure, or else the noise is too loud from other staffs and people trying to meddle and get you in the transfer portal to say, you're never going to get a fair shake. They're just always going to go in the portal and replace you and not even give you a fair crack. I think that's where the youth movement is really necessary here, because the kids have to see it for themselves if they're ready or not by the end of the season before they start overhauling the roster yet again.
Yeah, and you made a good point earlier talking about recruiting, and this is a I've been team portal. I've been, especially because of the situation Florida State's been in. You know, again, Mike Norvell, and I know you guys talked about today on Jeff Cameron's show, but like the first 2 years, they had no shot at signing good recruits. I mean, they couldn't even go on the road. The team had been terrible. It had been terrible since 2016. It wasn't just like a one-year blip. It was a bad team 2017, 18, 19, 20. And they couldn't go on the road to recruit. It was just a perfect storm. So then by 2022, you start playing pretty good football and you can recruit some. But I really thought it was smart to go heavy in the portal because they had success with that first crop of guys: Jamie Robinson, Jermaine Johnson, Keir Thomas, the running back from Jayshon Corbin. Like, they hit at a really high level, and then they kept that going while the rest of the country was kind of sleeping. Like, nobody else was as hot and heavy in the portal as Mike Norvell was, and it was helping him. Well, the problem is I don't know how you wean yourself off of that. And maybe they've been slow to try to wean themselves off of it, but I think it's hard to wean yourself off of it, because the one thing about this class, and you touched on it earlier, they were able to bring in guys who were good leaders and kind of alphas, maybe in some of those last couple of classes. This year, we were all impressed by the level of player they were able to get. And that sounds crazy to say right now, right. But from a pedigree standpoint, they weren't, this offseason, they were able to go get guys from Alabama, 5 guys from Alabama. I mean, if you told somebody that 4 years ago or 3 years ago, you never would have believed it. They were able to get basically a fifth of a class from Alabama to come to Florida State, a bunch of 5 stars, 4 stars. And you get Marvin Jones Jr. from Georgia, Jalen Brown from LSU. I mean, these are all guys that Florida State wanted out of high school and couldn't get. And now you've got a chance to get them and you bring them in. How would you say no to that?
Yeah.
But it's a different DNA than the guys you had gotten previously. The Tatum Bethunes, the Jarian Joneses, Fabian Lovitz, Braden Fisks, Jared Verse from Albany. You know, so they kind of deviated because they had the possibility to do that after going 13-0 and having the Battle's End to support them. But it hasn't worked. But I don't know if that 1 year, this group right now means, like you said, that, that was the mistake. They should have just been all high school. I don't know, man. Like, you take the good with the bad. They may have missed with some of these guys, or maybe it'll just take some time, but it's definitely not worked so far.
Jeremy has a question. He says, it's a hard one. I don't think so. Would we have been better off with Lane Kiffin after last season? Sorry. Time for the hard questions, fellas. No, I don't think so.
I don't even know what the scenario is.
Well, let's say Mike goes to Alabama.
Oh, I got you. Thank you. I mean, who knows, man? Like, I don't know. I don't, and again, like, this is where we're at right now. Like, they won 19 straight football games, but now we're going to sit here and say, well, you think about it. I don't know why he hired this guy, and I don't know why he let this guy, and so now everybody's questioning everything. That's part of the deal. Like you said, he makes $10 million. I'm inclined to think that Mike Norvell's a good football coach. Is he perfect? No. Has he made mistakes? 100%. Certainly he misevaluated this football team so far. But I don't think letting Mike Norvell, if they had let Mike Norvell leave, think about where they were at that point in time.
Yeah.
You just got snubbed from the playoff. You just got beat by 60 by Georgia. Half your team is flirting with the transfer portal. And now your head coach leaves for Alabama. I mean,
yep.
I mean, at first the whole roster would have left. I just think it would have been a disaster. So, yeah, I think they're better off now. But does that mean he's going to turn this around? I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a tough challenge.
No, again, I think part of his mistake and the miscalculation, you look at the way that they schemed up their offensive game plan and the substitution patterns for Georgia Tech. I think they thought they were just going to roll in there,
yes,
take care of business. And, if that means they win by 10, like Mike doesn't have a problem winning by 10 versus winning by 40. He just wants to get it done. If they get more players exposure, get some guys some reps, like that's the miscalculation here. And
he blew that game. I agree. I think he blew that game thinking that they were going to win it just by doing whatever they wanted to do. And at least that's my perception, the way they called the game in the substitutions. Then this past game, I think there were some coaching decisions and also maybe overreacting in terms of run pass splits and things like that. But it doesn't really, it's just you're 0-2.
Dave, again, thank you again for the contribution. Ira, I wanted to meet you. Ira, I wanted to meet you in Ireland so I could share all my inappropriate Renegade Express contributions. My wife wouldn't let me post. Also,
Slancha.
Yeah, a delayed one. There you go. Little Hooter Brown for you, boys. Lee Fields asks, can you all remember such a precipitous decline in an FSU football team from one year to another and it not be expected? Ooh, man.
I mean, I'm guessing 2000 to 2001 was a shock. I mean, it was a shock. But I don't know if people expected it at all or not. I mean, Wenke was leaving.
Yeah, that was middle school for me. 15 to 16, like 15, they had a bad loss to Georgia Tech. Don't get me wrong. Like we all understood that. And they kind of mailed it in the Peach Bowl against
16 to 17.
16 to 17 was pretty rough. But I mean, like 16 was the year that they lost to Louisville and Louisville dropped 100 on them. Like that was, and old Papuchis was here with North Carolina. But Dalvin Cook tried to put the team on his back and he couldn't do it.
But I feel like we thought maybe that was a blip and you're just kind of thinking, I don't know, man. I thought 17, I thought they would, they were 2-5 in 17. Like people seem to forget that. They were awful. Yeah. They got blown out by Boston College. They didn't just lose, they got blown out by Boston College that year. So that 17. Oh boy, that was a rough one. But yeah, I don't think anything like this. I mean, because this was totally unexpected. None of us ever thought this was going to be a great football team, but we did think it was going to be a 10-2-ish, 9-3-ish team that maybe if they can win the ACC, they can get in the playoff. But to start off like this, I mean, it's totally shocking.
It's absurd. And I get in 16 they won the Orange Bowl. I'm just saying that the loss to Louisville was so stunning in how fundamentally bad Florida State looked that day. You were like, oh my God, I didn't know we could ever have this happen again. It felt like with the recruiting classes that you were impervious to such a blowout defeat, and you were not. And then there were more of them that came in 2017. Giovanni, we appreciate it. He's staying optimistic. Is it a blessing in disguise? It forces Norvell to address questions surrounding the staff that he otherwise would rationalize after a successful season. Continued. We have a ceiling on recruiting under the current staff, and that's our limitation to prominence again. Is this how we start the next chapter? Interesting questions here.
It is. That's a good question.
So he's saying that obviously after last year, 13-0, snub be damned. We did our job. It was the committee that left us out. We're doubling down. It's working rather than maybe trying to look under rocks to find problems. Do you buy that, Ira? What do you think?
It's not a bad thought, man. It depends on, I mean, we'll know based on what Mike Norvell does with this, but yeah, this has to completely force him to reevaluate everything. And listen, I think all of us, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we have been big fans of Mike Norvell and the job he's done. Clearly, he's done a great job. That does not mean I've agreed with every hire he's made, every decisions he's made. There have been people, and I'm not going to name names, there's people in the support staff, people on the coaching staff that I thought, I think like they could do better there. But they were having success. You won 19 straight games. And at that point, as Giovanni said, like you're not going to make a bunch of changes after that because I think you worry about chemistry. I think Mike Norvell cares more about having guys that have a similar mindset to him, similar belief value about how they treat players. There's a lot of, when you bring in new coaches, man, one coach can change the entire complexion of a team. And, for example, when Jimbo was here, there was a former coach that he brought back onto a staff that several of the coaches asked him to not bring to the staff because they did not want him. They thought it would be bad for the team and for the coaching staff. And Jimbo did it anyway. So that is a real thing. Like if you have a person in your office, whatever work setting you work in, if you have somebody you don't like or that they don't pull their weight, that can affect the whole staff. So I think Norvell has been trying to really kind of go with that continuity. Yeah, man. After this, if this continues the way it could go, and it could go awful. Somebody asked for my W's and L's. I'm not going to give them, but based on what we've seen so far, there's going to be a whole lot more L's than W's. And at that point, yeah, man, Mike Norvell has to evaluate everything in his program from the bottom to the top, including himself. And so, yeah, sometimes when you have rough times, it does force you to reevaluate. I think that's a fair point.
Did you see the expression on his face on television at all? I don't know if the press box setup is like it was last year.
I did not.
Okay.
I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
So real quick, Director Ben, don't panic. I'm changing the skins here because we had it on the post-game show. So forgive us if you see some other logos. Yeah, there's Gene and I, but we put it up in this particular area. So look at this. I've never seen this before. Wait for it.
Yeah.
Wait for it. That look right there. What I said on the post, look at that. He's been angry.
Yeah.
He's been mad at officials. He's been somewhat confused about something. That is somebody who is having an existential crisis right before you in the moment. And that's a 7-0 game, a 7-0 game in the second quarter. I get Boston College has a goal to go in that moment. But that looks different than 0-4. The game up at Louisville where they got smoked after Jordan Travis opened with a crossover dribble touchdown. Like that day, he had this scowl on his face, like, "Oh, I'm gonna fix this. This is ridiculous. I can't do anything about it now, but I'm gonna fix this." Which is kind of the expression he had in the post-game pressers that you were at Aviva Stadium. It was like this: "Oh no, I cannot. You know what? I miscalculated. This is going to get fixed." That is the look of a man who's overwhelmed.
Well, I think what you do in that situation, Jeff and I talked. Jeff brought that up to me when we were just talking on the phone earlier today, and he brought up that look because I hadn't seen it, and I just know myself, and one thing I really guard against is because I think it's human nature. When things start going poorly, it's very easy to start thinking back to every regret, every decision you've made that has not worked out, and kind of get overwhelmed by that. And that, to me, that's kind of wonder if he's realizing in that moment, like, man, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done this. I should have paid more attention to that. And that's, but the problem is it's not positive to think like that. You have to focus on what can you fix, especially we talked at the very beginning of the show, like what's the low hanging fruit? What are the things you can hang your hat on? Fix those and then start attacking the other stuff. If you think about everything that's wrong right now, and I think that's what fans are doing and media, like we're all doing this, is pointing to the music and everything else that's going wrong. They've got to figure out what they can do and fix those things in the short term and then try to go from there. But no, that's I certainly understand why it was alarming to see that. I just think it's probably he's realizing that a lot of the things he thought he was wrong about.
Well, my thought in the moment was it's 7-0, maybe it's 14-0. The game's not over yet, but then I see I go, "Oh, this thing's probably over." Oh.
You're looking for the second half line.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the team total before the game, if you want to get into that, for Boston College was 16.5, and I thought, I'm like, what is Vegas doing? That's it? You think they're going to maybe score 17 points? I don't know. And obviously we know how it ended, and Florida State's got a lot of cleaning up to do. At Warchant TV tomorrow around 11:30, 11:45, I'd say, you'll see Mike Norvell's next availability. Warchant.com will have practice updates tomorrow. This is the one lone availability we have this week before they reset for next week, unless they amended their schedule. I believe that's right, Ira.
Yeah, and I will say real quick, they did practice today. There was no media access.
Yeah.
And bye weeks are always a little iffy because it's not really like a normal week of practice, but we'll be there at practice tomorrow. I did hear from somebody who was around the team that morale has been good, that guys are – it's not like you've got a mutiny. It's not like guys are mad and want to leave. The morale is good. It seemed like to this person, the guys are trying to put get things back on track. So we'll see when we're out there tomorrow.
So here's the last thing we'll do before wrapping up for tonight. And thank you to everybody who stopped by for both shows tonight. Wake Up Warchant at 6, and then obviously tonight the Smash aired at 7. We'll return to a little double feature. Thank you to everybody who did that. And if you didn't see Wake Up Warchant, head on over when you're done with this and check that out. It's available now on the stream. All right, Ira, this is a blind guess. He's going to be asked about quarterback tomorrow. Mike Norvell's approach to the question is what? What do you think?
We're going to continue to evaluate. We're going to look for how to make the team as good as possible. I don't think he'll commit either way. I guess unless he felt like he needs to give DJ a vote of confidence, then maybe he would do it. But I don't think it helps him to. I mean, I think it's somewhat of a, it's a slight competitive advantage to let Memphis think that they may have to, prepare for a mobile quarterback. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't be definitive about it either way, but unless he just feels like DJ needs a vote of confidence.
So unlike the first drive of the second half, he will punt on this particular question. Is what you're saying. It's all fun and games. Everybody gets to take pot shots right now because we're all hurting. Guys, you're hurting out there. I know the thumbs up doesn't usually, align with hurting. But if you're hurting out there at 0-2, hit the thumbs up button underneath this video, like the video, subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. And make sure that you check out warchant.com tomorrow for practice updates. We'll be watching very closely what happens here in a bye-week practice. Brett Taylor has it right in the chat here. Coach Speak airs tomorrow. It debuts tomorrow evening at 5. You want some laughs? We got some laughs. They're on the way for you. Was it a good episode today, Ira? Was when you taped it or yesterday?
Yeah, I think it's there's some funny stuff. You'll see some of the old time favorites, like the coach down in Hogtown and the coach over in Waco, Texas, and a few of the other classic favorites. Yeah, it was a good time. It's a little cathartic to make fun of some other teams since there's not a lot of good things to say right now about the Noles.
That's right. We'll have reports from practice tomorrow. JCS, the Jeff Cameron Show, will be live at 1 o'clock. Coach Speak at 5 o'clock, and all the content in between. Stay tuned to warchant.com for the best Florida State coverage when times are good and times are bad. Rain or shine, we're here for you. For Ira Schafel, managing editor of warchant.com. Enjoy the rest of that red stripe, sir. For Director Ben Spicer behind the scenes. Thank you to State Farm agent Russ Voorhis for sponsoring this here program. And we will talk to you next time on Warchant TV. Good night, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.